Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alumni Conversations. My name is Shoshana Bass. I am a clinical assistant professor and an academic director here at NYU School of Professional Studies. I am in the Management and Technology Department that sits within the Division of Programs and Business. And as part of my responsibilities, I oversee the Master of Science in Management and Systems, the Master of Science in Project Management, and a variety of continuing education, certificates, and standalone courses in the technology management area. So before coming to NYU SPS, had a career in sales and technology operations at a variety of multinational organizations, and have a PhD in management, and then joined NYU SPS a little over a year ago. I am extremely pleased to introduce to you today Sabina Ewing. Sabina is the CIO and Vice President of Business and Technology Services at Abbott, which is a global healthcare company, where she's been for the past year. And before Abbott, Sabina was at Pfizer for 13 years in a variety of tech-related roles, culminating as head of technology for one of Pfizer's divisions located in Shanghai. Sabina has also been recognized in multiple ways in her industry and in her field, including Pharmaceutical Executive Magazine, which identified her as an emerging pharma leader, and US Black Engineer and Information Technology Magazine labeling her as a superstar. So Sabina has a BS from University of Virginia, and she is an alumni of the Masters in Management and Systems from NYU SPS. And we are so excited to have her here. Welcome, Sabina.
Thank you, Dr. Bass. It is a wonderful opportunity to join today's conversation, not to mention to, in any way, shape, or form, share my perspective as I think of 21st century technology, and moreover, an opportunity to give back to SPS, given the benefits that I've received as an alumni from the program. So thank you again for the opportunity, and look forward to sharing more about, my perspective, but also my experience as an alum.
Terrific. What I would say to those of you joining us today is if you could please put in the Q&A any questions that you have for Sabina about her experiences, and we will try to address them at the end of the program. So let's get started. Sabina, can you tell us a little bit about your career path at the earlier stages of your career, and then sort of what led you to then undertake the Massey degree?
So I have been in technology longer than I want to articulate. But it turns out that I started coding at 10 in the 2GL languages. And although I thought I was going to be an attorney, it turns out that after undergrad, I joined Arthur Andersen, one of the big consulting firms at the time, and really started as a member of the advanced technology group in the consulting practice, doing custom development and custom roles, if you will, development related roles, running program and project management teams, large development teams on clients in a variety of industries, financial services, telecom, government as well. And after spending a certain number of years there, for those not terribly familiar with Arthur Andersen, it actually was the parent company of Andersen Consulting, which became Accenture. And it was the accountants for Enron. And so as a function of that, the firm, it ultimately imploded, and Sarbanes-Oxley 404 came about. But I spent my career, early career there, really through a variety of roles in technology, as I mentioned. And then I decided to become a school teacher. When the firm got indicted, I said that was time for me to do something different. And I became a New York City public school teacher. So I taught 5th grade in the South Bronx as a fellow. And I realized that, quite frankly, while teaching is a noble profession and 3 out of my 4 grandparents were educators, it just wasn't quite right for me. And so it's important to also recognize that you can have pivot moments in your career. And so I actually decided to head back to consulting, joined Bearing Point, where much of the US practice from Arthur Andersen had joined. I went to Bearing Point. By that time, I was really focused on package solutions. So I had spent a number of years implementing PeopleSoft in different spaces. And then as you hit a certain time in your life, you decide that you need to think about family, quality of life, getting off the road. I decided to join American Express. And so I joined American Express in the tax and business services group, again, doing consulting for large scale customers and working. One of my biggest customers happened to be down at Fannie Mae, helping them through their Sarbanes-Oxley 404 initiative. And again, looking to, get off the road, I decided that I was going to go back into consulting, oddly enough, because I love the intensity and variety that it provided. But then a friend said to me, why don't you think about life sciences? And I've never looked back. So I joined Wyeth Pharmaceuticals. And for those that, might be familiar, in fact, Pfizer's vaccines division is a result of the acquisition of Wyeth. But Wyeth also had a consumer division that had Centrum, Advil, Chapstick, and the like, and Preparation H. And, I started there as the director in HR related systems, responsible for like their HR portal. And what was interesting for me and a key component of how I've accelerated in my career is raising my hand for the more challenging initiatives. And most people will tell you it's really important to raise your hand as well. And so I raised my hand when Pfizer came knocking to acquire Wyeth back in 2009, took on the role of integration around the HR systems. But as is the case when you work in with an acquisition, there are two versions of the same person working on something. And the only way that you differentiate yourself is you have to, get in the game and not sit on the sidelines. And so there was a gentleman running their HR systems doing a great job. And I had shown promise in what I was able to do there, and decided actually to raise my hand for an opportunity that everybody else was running away from, right? So that was a large, integration effort in creating what we call a single face to our customers, right? And so it's all of the order to cash, global logistics and supply chain, really getting products to customers. And so I led that initiative. That went very well. And the Pfizer CIO, who happened to also have been the Wyeth CIO, after one of our executive report out meetings, said, what do you want to do next? And the thing that I said to him was, I don't want your job. There's a whole bunch of things I'm willing to do, but I'm not willing to be CIO because I don't really want that job. And funny enough, he ignored, I guess, what I had to say and hired me as his first ever chief of staff. And as a function of being the chief of staff for him, I actually got to help him run the full large scale organization that was Pfizer Technology, which was a single, global technology organization. And then to your intro, Dr. Bass, literally went around the table in roles, right? So running technology for our specialty care and oncology business, then running IT for the vaccines and oncology business, then running it for all the corporate functions such as HR, legal, corporate affairs, compliance. And what that really entailed was really making sure that we were bringing to bear technical capabilities that would drive business outcomes. So there's the operational piece of, an organization that technology enables, but then there's also, in this case, the call it the digital, the mobile, the analytics assets that really are tied to how you're generating revenue. So that hopefully gives you a view on that. And then, as you mentioned, in terms of where it culminated, after corporate functions and running operations like the help desk and all the collaboration around the world, et cetera, I raised my hand to be the global head of the Upjohn division as we decided we were going to headquarter that in Shanghai. So I moved to Shanghai and was there really for a 3-year assignment. Then COVID hit. And so I came home. And at the same time, we pivoted to a different type of transaction versus spinning that division to stand up and go public. And when I came back home in, a little over a year ago, Abbott pinged me and I said, sounds interesting and dynamic. And so now I have moved to the Midwest to lead the technology organization for Abbott globally. And it's a blast because it's a $34 billion company, and we have a lot of growth in our environment, and we have a lot of challenges and dynamics. And Abbott's purpose is really to help bring life-changing technologies to the world. So I'm thrilled to be doing that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the variety of experiences that I've had to date.
Thank you so much. So at what point in your career did you decide to get the Master's in Management and Systems degree, and what led you to making that decision?
Yeah, so I was probably about 13 years into my career, because I had been running as a consultant, and I'd been looking at programs. I mentioned I thought I was going to go to law school, considered that. But ultimately, I enjoyed what I was doing. And technology, as I talked about, having started coding at 10, was somewhat innate and second nature for me. And so I realized that I wanted to pursue graduate studies. I wanted to make sure that I continued to build on my capabilities. And so as I evaluated programs, I was well into my career. And so, NYU offered this, and SPS more specifically, offered a great opportunity for me to have a robust and rigorous program. And at the same time, the option for the program was completely online or in person or a hybrid. I happen to have done it 100% virtual. And I'll tell you, if I had my druthers to do it again, I probably would have done a combination versus all virtual, because it was a great experience, but I would have loved to have taken more advantage of the capabilities and resources within SPS. And so it was really that desire to pursue graduate studies, to also get that work done through a robust program and a reputable institution. NYU has an incredible brand, and so that was the impetus for pursuing the master's.
Thank you. So, what can you share about your experience in the Management and Systems degree program? You did speak a little bit to the online aspect of it, but what do you think were some of your greatest learnings that you had, and maybe some of the opportunities that were open to you as a student?
Yeah, so I would say, interestingly for me, this was a great continuation of sort of the experience that I had in undergrad. So my undergrad was in business and management, information systems, and finance. And so the format of teamwork, the format of, having professors that challenged you, was a continuation. But then notice, I had 13 years in between that. And so I also came to this new experience with my business and practical work experience. And I thought that the SPS program really valued that aspect of it. When I think back to the professors that I had and the quality of the program, I would say, taking advantage also of the discussions and the projects. We figure SPS was virtual before COVID, right? And enabling that. And so it wasn't that I was, it was interactive, right? It was an interactive and dynamic program. I also think about the variety of, the coursework. I have to tell you, I actually wanted to do something. I wanted to add on, because I think they had started with strategy while I was in the program, and thought that was great. But the ability to sort of add that in while I was, courses in that versus, as my ultimate degree. But it was that level of rigor, and it was also the discussions that one had, and how for me at the time, the work experience really lent itself to providing a great experience. Not to mention, the participants were in varying stages of their career. And so for me, I probably was longer tenured in my career than most. And so as a function of that, it gave me an opportunity to really help nurture and provide perspective for others. And so I certainly took advantage of that. Like I said, I think in hindsight, it would have been better for me to really also engage more directly on site, so I could have built more relationships, as well as taken advantage of more of what was offered, but now I know given the Violet Network and how that's available globally, I'm sure as taking advantage of those things are extremely beneficial to students as well. From an opportunity, and granted, it's now a good 10 years since I've graduated from SPS, right? So I'm sure things have evolved quite a bit in the student experience. And that was another thing that I thought was valuable, was the fact that SPS was constantly looking at how do you make it better. And I'm sure as you've taken on the role, right, you're looking at how do we make ourselves better? How do we, make sure that SPS stays competitive, contemporary, as well as really engaging for students. So, for me, in hindsight, I'm very appreciative of the offering that allowed for that flexibility for me to be able to do it virtually, because I had a family and other obligations. But certainly, in hindsight, I would have loved to have gotten more engaged in person.
Thank you. And you described my charter perfectly. So can you speak a little bit more about, how having this degree has changed or shifted in any way the trajectory of your career, or how you may have leveraged the degree or even the networks that you built while you were pursuing the degree in your career since graduating?
So I think, when you're in your career, right, you might get exposed to certain things. For me, I had spent much of my time really up until that point heavily on the application development side or the program management side, whereas with the degree, you to security and cybersecurity, all of these other different elements, I would say helps and has provided some value and benefit around that, if you will. Because I got to look at different, as we say in technology, different layers in the stack, right? Outside of the ones that I resided in, that was very helpful and is a benefit to me, right? Because in my capacity now as a CIO, I have a foundation. For instance, I didn't spend a ton of time in infrastructure, but from my studies there, I do have, an understanding around networking. I do have an understanding around certain aspects of the stack to be responsible, right? And certainly leveraging those who have deeper expertise within my organization in that realm. I would also say that, for me, if you look at certain roles, right? While I think historically you could have CIOs who had a bachelor's degree, but more and more you will see that to lead in certain respects, you do have to have a graduate degree. And so I found that, I had evaluated this degree versus an MBA. And I felt like this gave me a bit more of the specificity that, since I had decided to remain in technology, that really was going to be beneficial, right? I had the business acumen. I had gone through a rigorous and robust undergraduate program mirroring an MBA at the undergraduate level. And this would fine tune on the management and systems side. So that was the value in specifically selecting the degree, but also in terms of the benefits I've seen it yield since.
Terrific, thank you. Do you have a favorite course or a favorite professor that you can recall from the program?
All right,
or one that's helped you the most, even if it's not your favorite.
As I think about it, there are a lot of, really fun and interesting professors. I will say the one that sticks with me and certainly was an eye-opener for me was really around the security piece of things. And the funny thing is, I would say 11 years ago, and it was more than 11, like maybe 12 years ago when I took it, there was a certain dimension to security that we were looking at. Now, when I think about the role that cybersecurity plays in all environments, it's incredible. We had a fun way of doing it. We watched a couple of, as part of the curriculum, you had a movie that had a security tinge to it. And then as a team, you worked on a specific project associated with that movie and the security dimensions to it. But now more than ever, right, with a 300% increase in ransomware attacks and the like, it's really important to have been a great foundation for me in grounding around certain dimensions of security. So that's the one that sort of resonates for me. But I had some really dynamic and fun professors. I'd have to go back into the archives, quite frankly, Dr. Bass, to do a good service.
Absolutely, thank you. So my final question to you is if you have any other thoughts that you would like to share to current students or prospective students or alumni even about SPS, or tips about what it takes to climb to the executive level in the technology industry, that would be really valuable, I think, to our audience.
So the one tip I will offer up is, or maybe a few, but primary to that is, it's really important that you build strong relationships, that you can call on folks. I still call on folks that I started my very first job. And so you can't treat it like it's transactional. And I think SPS and the opportunity for people to start building really strong networks based on folks in their respective areas, I would encourage folks to recognize that it can't be transactional, that you really are foundationally establishing seeds of your professional network through the individuals that you meet at SPS. The other piece then, and the reason I make mention of that is, it's really important to be extraordinarily good at what you do, especially early in your career. But then there becomes a point where that exceptionalism, or the ability to do your work really well, or to be really competent, it becomes table stakes. And quite frankly, once you hit the level where that is table stakes and everyone is supposed to be at a certain level of competence, then in order to advance, it's about relationships and people being able for you to be pulled up. And so I think that's why I gave that important point about really making sure that you're building those skills around building, strong professional relationships, such that it helps you solve challenges and problems that come your way, but also builds the muscle memory for building relationships within whatever professional setting that you're in, such that people pluck you up for the advancement in one's career. And then the other piece I would say is, you have raise your hand. I am the daughter of an accountant, so I grew up being risk averse, right? My dad's no longer an accountant, but I grew up the daughter of an accountant, so I was fairly risk averse. The fact that I took that giant risk and became a New York City public school teacher as a New York City teaching fellow, right? That changed my risk profile substantially. And in the moment when you take that, you make that choice and you're pursuing something, it doesn't necessarily always feel like you had made the best choice. But for me, that was such a pivotal moment, right? The fact that when I got back into consulting, the people that I was with, they were now ahead, and the people that were behind me are now caught up. That made it a big, tough moment for me. But I readily recognized that the changing of the risk profile and the willingness to raise my hand and say, put me in coach for the biggest, toughest roles definitely makes a difference. I will also say, to your point about, to prospective students, right? Or to anyone who's now investing in themselves through an SPS degree, that NYU experience, that NYU brand really translates in terms of longevity over, once you've earned your degree, right? That is not only is the information and the education and learning capabilities that you gain something that no one can take away from you, but at the same time, because as you talked about, Dr. Bass, with your remit, there's a constant, rigor around the program. How do you make it better? How do you get it better? That in and of itself lends itself well to that longevity of a high quality brand in terms of what that degree represents once you attain it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I would encourage anyone who has any questions to please go ahead and put those in the Q&A. I do have a couple that have come in, so I will start with those. So one question is, what do you see as your biggest challenge as a CIO from a day-to-day operational perspective?
Well, I would say, I'll go beyond cybersecurity, because I think folks have to understand that that plays such an important role in protecting your enterprise, right? So cyber is the one that's always at the top of my mind every day, right? You never want to call from your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and today is Friday,
Right.
right? So so cyber is very invariably that. But the other piece is, technology is pervasive. And so what I think at this stage, when you talk about the realm that we're in, is making sure that you are, my remit right now is transforming us into what I term 21st century IT. And 21st century IT is not just, as I say, the folks or the guys in the rear with the gear. It's really driving a mindset shift, not only within the organization, but also within the culture of a company that has grown up with IT over the years, as a profession, which as a profession is less than 100 years old, right?
Right.
So, helping people understand that now more than ever, technology is the business in every domain. And so that is an overarching challenge of, moving the dial, especially when, the technology is so pervasive and people are accustomed now, it's at their fingertips. So, we have to, internal IT organizations must stay relevant and must stay focused on how we're affecting not only operational efficiencies, which is, as they say, the middle of the P&L, but more so how we're driving top line revenue for the enterprise.
That's such a great point, and you did mention sort of this balance between the operations and the transformation. I'm curious, how do you balance that? What percentage of your time do you devote to both of those two different tracks, and sort of how do you navigate the challenges of being able to tackle the operational issues but still thinking transformationally?
Yeah. Now, since I'm, working towards a year here at Abbott, it's really a function of setting the foundation. So probably, I'd say I'm more in the 65-35 type realm, 65% operational, 35% towards the future and the transformation. More so because I have a philosophy on how do you win, right? And the strategy that we've put forward as a leadership team is really built off of, first you have to make sure that you create an environment that allows the workforce, the talent within the workforce, to fully unleash their capabilities. So that's the first piece of it. But then the reason why I'm spending a tremendous amount of time on the operational piece of it is because you have to be what I call bulletproof on the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to ask you to help them with their strategies and driving top line revenue, which is directly tied to not only the company's financial performance, but their individual compensation and incentives, if you can't get the book of business that everybody expects you to have right. And so it's important to be, as I say, bulletproof on the fundamentals. And the more that you build out those aspects of the operations, it gives you more equity and credibility to have the conversations around value, creating value and driving that value for that top line component. So that's why it's at that particular, it's in that particular ratio.
Fantastic, thank you. So, I mean, at this point in your career, is there somebody that you look toward that inspires you, or that you are looking toward for mentorship or advice or guidance in your career at this point? Because you've sort of reached a pinnacle. I'm curious where you get your inspiration from.
So it's not one person, right? So, if I think about how, the components of the question you just asked, when I think about inspiration and where I get my energy from, it's from my organization, right? It's from that direct engagement and making sure that I'm staying current. So that's one piece of it. But then in terms of mentorship and in terms of looking to others, I build what I invariably call somewhat of your board of directors, right? So it's not just one person. You do build a personal board of directors, of advisors, of people you look to people that you say, wow, there are models of that 21st century IT I talk about. So, I'll mention one, Ted Colbert, he was the CIO, the global CIO for Boeing. Ted went from running, as the CIO to now running as the CEO for Boeing's global services because of how he transformed the technology organization and because of the requisite digital analytics capabilities that he had established. So I have the fortune of knowing Ted and seeing and having that as a reference point. I have a number of my peers in technology that I can always reach out to. And invariably, one of my biggest sponsors in my career was Jeff Kiesling, who was the CIO at Pfizer. And to this day, I still connect with Jeff in an advisory role. And when I talk about making sure that you don't treat the relationships that you have as transactional, another person that I reach out to is the former global managing partner for Arthur Andersen's business consulting practice, right? So, I can still reach out to Gail Steinel and ask Gail, for her perspective, which I did, by the way, before I started with Abbott. And so it's a more of a board of directors. I have really good friends from my Pfizer life. They're not technologists, but they give me a really great perspective based on their respective disciplines as I think through things. And so, my ultimate inspiration outside of the day-to-day work happens to be my children and my husband and my family. I'm the mother of girls, 2 girls, 11 and 5. And so, that inspires me to be a good role model for them, and also to make sure that I'm advancing, for instance, diversity and inclusion efforts such that they're going to be in a different position as they pursue whatever their aspirations are as well. So it's a multifold way in terms of building out, sort of how I think and how I approach things as well.
Thank you. So I don't know how much of this you still do at your level, but in terms of like someone who's just coming into, let's say, their first or maybe their second technology related position in an organization such as yours, are there things that you look for not just, of course, education and knowledge, but are there certain things that you're evaluating applicants for in the entry level of your organization that you think our students might be able to kind of talk to or emphasize or even to groom and develop as they're thinking about getting their first job in technology?
Yeah, so Abbott has an IT professional development program. So from undergrad and right early in career type roles, and so I have a blast engaging with those students because of the perspective they bring, right? Their respective perspective. And so I think I would encourage, there's the technical piece of things, right? And bringing the requisite skills. The thing that I also encourage folks to do is to try, especially early in career, is you won't have it all figured out. You won't have it all figured out off the bat. And so it's an open-mindedness and a willingness to really go after and try different things, right? It's also to be able to provide your point of view and insert it. Don't accept how things have always been done, but to do it with humility. Because, it's one thing to come in and just look at everything and say, oh, you guys do this wrong, you're dinosaurs, what have you. That doesn't get well received. Versus learning, being, staying curious, learning, bringing that perspective. I'm always looking for the folks who are willing to, step out, and rather than just sort of blend in, have a point of view, share a point of view, and of course, bring that technical expertise to the forefront. And by the way, not everyone is an extrovert like myself. And so it's not a function of the person who is, verbose or braggadocious, because I also balance that with making sure that I'm, gleaming from what I just said, perspective by inquisitively asking people that I might be more introverted as well. So it's making sure that you think you recognize that the talent resides within you, and that you bring that talent wherever you are, and bring that to bear. So that's what at my level, that's what I'm looking at. At deeper in my organization, I know they're looking for the people who have the technical skills, who have a certain understanding of program and project management, people who definitely have a certain level of business acumen, right? I think it's really important, if you're going to go in to through any of the SPS programs, that you build a certain level of business acumen, because that in and of itself will also help to differentiate you.
I love that you say that about business acumen, because one of the tenets of the degree that you have, the Management and Systems Master's Program, is that it does combine the management element along with the technology, so that it really enables the person to get a well-rounded view of the organization. And especially what you talked about earlier when you were talking about the table stakes, about how everyone really needs to have, the ability, the technical expertise and the skill, but what really will allow an individual in an organization to excel is how they utilize and leverage those skills through the management skills that they have. So I think that that's really critical. You did also mention, you brought up diversity and inclusion. So the question I have for you now, as a female and as a person of color, I'm interested to know about your experience, if you've had any sort of, certainly you've reached a high level in organization, but throughout your career, did you ever experience any, whether it was, overt, or whether it was, micro aggressions in terms of as in a diversity inclusion situation, where that has impacted you, and sort of, if so, how did you overcome that?
So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. I could sarcastically say, is water wet? The short of it is that absolutely. Right. I have been in situations as a woman where you say something and everybody's like, okay. And then 2 seconds later, a man says it and just used different words, but said the exact same thing. And now it's a brilliant idea. Right. And you feel challenged or minimized. What I've pushed, and now at this stage in my career, I'm able to vocalize it and call it out more. But, to the extent that you create settings that have more than 2 or 3, women in the fold in that group, they can amplify each other. And so, creating that's an important part of that for me. But absolutely, I've had that. The way I also describe it, Dr. Bass, is that, I've had, everyone wears some level of armor when they go to, I call us being corporate athletes, right? I happen to feel like I'm in, a professional team, sort of like an NBA franchise, but or an NFL franchise, pick a sport. But as a function of that, your armor, when you take it off, there are some wounds that are still healing. There are some wounds that are I'll call them nicks. You see you can see the scar, but it's not as visible. And so, yes, I've had situations where, I get presented for a role, and I've had that in the past. You get presented for the role, but all of a sudden a new requirement happens that never existed for anybody before you. And then you'll say, okay, well, maybe now they figure they need that, and that's why they're going to put that requirement in there. And then you find out, okay, yes, you don't get the role because you didn't have this particular requirement, only for the next person who comes after to fill that role to be a white male with less than what you have, right? So you go through that dynamic. But the thing that I also talk about, especially when I think of allyship, right, is that my advancement and opportunities were also propelled by managers who were not African-American, weren't female, and so, I often talk about, and I think he's one that I always think about, he's a Stern graduate, is, Fabrizio Franco, who was a manager at Anderson, who, put me on a project and said, Sabina, I think you're great. And he was willing to put me on a package solution project when I didn't have package experience. And that's where the world was moving, because it was moving from custom development to package. And that helped me then have some tangible experience to go back and ask the, you know, the SAP, the Oracle, the PeopleSoft. And I asked the PeopleSoft person first, again, you know, for a role, because when I went to them the first time, they said, well, you don't have any of that experience. And so, you know, it's creating that experience for me. I also talk about, you know, Ron Goldberg, who always put me on the big projects, and they were challenges. So they became what I call VICs, visible, important, complex initiatives that gave you know, presence. Or Dave Dempscher, you know, who in my Wyatt days, you know, hired me in because he thought, okay, I have an African-American female, I can bring her in, she's talented. Let's, you know, I'll create the opportunity for you. And then I have Jeff Kiesling, as I mentioned, who was the Wyeth and then Pfizer CIO, who then said, even though I told him I didn't want to be a CIO, he made me his chief of staff. And then, you know, less than 10 years later, I'm a CIO within Pfizer, and now the global CIO at Abbott. So, you know, I think I have had those experiences. I've had those disappointments. I will say, as a New Yorker, because I grew up in Brooklyn, that New York grit helped pick me back up and dust myself off. That New York grit also gives me some pointy elbows, so that I stand up for myself in certain moments in a very professional way. And so, you know, while I have those wounds, as I say, when you take off the armor, the fact still remains. I had a lot of other individuals who stood up and in meaningful ways, and from an allyship perspective, actually help me, you know, propel me in advance. Along with, of course, the support I would anticipate, you know, everybody else gets too, from your family and your friends, you know, that undergird you, especially when you encounter those challenges.
I love that response. Thank you so much. Sabina, what a pleasure to speak with you today, to interview you about your experience, both in your career and as a student, and now an alumni from the NYU SPS, the program, the Master's in Management and Systems. It has really been an honor and a privilege, so thank you so much. And at that, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It's been my pleasure.